Final topic for tonight's question and answer with the doc. It happened on a thread that I was active in, and it was about functional medicine. Functional medicine is one of those topics that I'm not sure whether to get fired up about it or not. So we'll just kind of see how it goes. I was going to kind of start off the topic of functional medicine with a little bit of personal history. When I was in high school, I had a paper that I was going to write about what do you want to do when you grew up. And I knew by the time I was a junior in high school that I wanted to be a doctor of some sort. I thought at that point maybe I wanted to go into sports medicine, or maybe I wanted to go into pediatrics or be an emergency room physician. Every time that I had an opportunity to do that kind of thing where I could shadow somebody in a job shadow situation or as a mentorship situation, I would learn more about those positions and figure out that maybe it wasn't exactly for me. So I was doing this search, and my mom had always been under chiropractic care for an accident that she had before I was born. And I knew about chiropractic. I'd been walking on my aunt's back since the time I was like a little kid. And Dad always made me rub his feet, and so I knew that there's body work involved, and I wasn't really sure what chiropractic was. So at my local library, I happened to pick up a book and read about chiropractic, and there were some things about it that really switched me on. First thing being that there was a philosophy behind the healthcare system that said that there was innate intelligence in the inside of the human body, and that innate intelligence ran from the brain down the spinal cord out to all the nerves, to all the parts of the body, and helped the body regulate itself with the outside world. And there was an idea that interference to that system, to that innate intelligence, was part of the source of disease. There was an entity called subluxations that would interfere with the body's ability to communicate with itself, and that would lead to dysfunction. And so chiropractors weren't necessarily treating things like low back pain, which what I was familiar with, or neck pain, like what my mom had. What they were doing was removing interference to the system to allow it to function the best that it could. And when I talk to my patients, all my new patients, I share that story, and I say, I was talking to my dad about this as we drove down to a hockey game one winter's night in our pickup truck. My dad's always been a really good sounding board, and here was his only child talking to him about the fact that he wanted to go be a quack in his eyes. My dad grew up in a generation where chiropractic wasn't very accepted, that a lot of those guys were ambulance chasers, and they were the guys in the leisure suits out there adjusting in kind of shifty looking buildings. And yeah, so I understood later on kind of where his values had come from. He's one of my biggest supporters now. We've talked, for, gosh, I've been doing this professionally for over 10 years. So over that period of time, I've helped him understand really what we're all about. But again, it all comes down to that core philosophy, that there's a source to a problem, and by addressing the source of the issue, that's how the outside manifestations of the disease are taken care of. So back in 2010, there's a video that gets posted on YouTube by the Institute of Functional Medicine and a doctor by the name of Mark Hyman. Mark Hyman. And he also has done a TED Talk on functional medicine, talking about this systems-based approach to medicine, not looking at the disease per se. In one of his TED Talks, he says that diseases don't exist, that there's a collection of symptomatology behind them that ends up manifesting into a disease. But by understanding how the systems all interplay, that's really when you get to the source of the problem. Reducing things like inflammation and reducing things like mitochondrial dysfunction, imbalances on the inside of the body, that the doctors who work in functional medicine aren't prescribing medications as again, I mentioned the lock and key model. They aren't looking for a disease to match a pill. What functional medicine doctors do is they look at the lifestyle and the change in the lifestyle in order to address the outward manifestation. Every time I hear someone espouse the benefits of functional medicine, I can't help but think of 1895 when chiropractic was invented. And I gotta tell you, this is not a chirocentric thing. I think about when homeopathy was invented, I think about when naturopathy was invented. way back when acupuncture was invented. I mean, we're talking about holistic healthcare paradigms that have existed for centuries, essentially being usurped by the medical profession as a new idea. And that's probably what rubs me the most. And I gotta say, never talked to Mark Hyman. I don't know what his thoughts are on this. I was trying to read through interviews and see where, where he stood on these kinds of things, but just my personal opinion. There has been ways of dealing with healthcare that by centuries outlast things like functional medicine. Am I glad that the medical profession, at least a segment of it, is starting to look at some of those modalities like Ayurvedic medicine that has existed for forever in Eastern cultures and say, hey, look, there might be some value to this? Yes, absolutely. I'm very, very, very glad that there are some people who have started that shift. It tells me that what's really happened is that there's a tipping point in our society. There was a study done on the utilization of CAM, so complementary alternative medicine, which is not a term that I love, but it is a term that everything has gotten dropped into, whether it's chiropractic or acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy, Ayurvedic, yoga, prayer, meditation, behavioral therapies. There's a lot of things that have gotten lumped in under that same umbrella. And visits to CAM practitioners has just been skyrocketing. Now, there's also been studies that say, is this a rejection of conventional medicine? And the answer to that is no. But what they found when they did the research was that people just don't want to get rid of all the traditional medical model. There are some definite benefits there. Emergency medicine is fantastic. I mean, the life-saving technology that we have now is way beyond where we were 50 years ago. There are people that are living now today because of the invention of some of that medical technology. But they're seeing that there's risks involved with that, and there's a propensity to do let's find you've got this disease, so we're going to match up this pill with it. And they're seeing a lot of side effects with it. There are stated goals within that model of having every man over the age of 50 on blood pressure medication. I don't think it's a sustainable model for healthcare. And so there are people within the medical model that are seeing what we're doing as alternative healthcare practitioners and going, there's been a great big shift of people, a sea change, as they would say in Australia, towards that model of healthcare. Maybe we ought to rethink. Maybe we ought to figure out what the common threads are here. Looking at things like inflammation, looking at how physical stress impacts the body, looking at how mental, emotional stress impacts the body, looking at how chemical stress impacts the body. B.J. Palmer, the developer of chiropractic, called them the traumas, the thoughts, and the toxins as the root causes for subluxations, for those dysfunctional relationships within the body that were causing interference to the nerve system that threw everything out of whack and caused disease in the first place. So I would love to be able to work with integrative medicine in a way that says, hey, we're going to go ahead and take what we're going to call functional medicine. And when I have patients who need things like, there's a fact of life out there. We've got 25 million diabetics in this country. 75 million are pre-diabetic. I can give them all the exercise and nutritional information that I want to till I'm blue in the face, but I'm not ever going to prescribe anyone insulin. I'm not ever going to, if I've got somebody who's had a heart surgery, be able to, is a blood pressure medication useful at that point in time? Yeah, probably. You break your arm, do you want some pain medication? Okay, that's not in my scope of practice, and I hope it never is. It is not my job. Again, because my approach to how the body's functioning is from an inside-out approach, and so that's what I do best, and that's what I'm always going to stick with. But to have somebody else in the team that does the studies on the side effects of the medications and does the studies on how can we put this all together for such a complicated organ like the thyroid. I could talk for hours about how densely organized the thyroid is when it comes to how your hormone cycles work. Those types of deep study, I think, are ironically still needed even in something like a functional medicine model. Hyman talks about how there's going to be a move away that from the specialist end of the spectrum towards the super generalists to really understanding how full systems work. And I gotta say, they're gonna start getting really surprised when they start digging into the immune system. Most of the paradigm that exists right now for the reason for inoculation has to do with something called antibody titers. And those have a lot to do with one arm of the immune system called antibodies. I mentioned that in the previous talk that I just did. If functional medicine is really going to get into things like the immune system and what's causing inflammation, they're going to start getting into the fact that antibody titers are not the only way to measure immunity to things. I'm going to foresee, I'm going to make a bold prediction here that in the next 10 years, if functional medicine continues to grow, which I really hope it does, you're going to start seeing a bigger push by that movement within the medical profession into, I'm going to say, maybe different vaccination methods. I'm not going to say they're going to give up that shift entirely, but I do think that one of the ways that, oh, did I freeze again? That one of the ways that the body's going to end up responding is going to be appreciated that any exposure to microorganisms have to go from outside in, not directly into the body. I think that and all the extra gunk that's in there is part of the reason that we're seeing some of the health issues related with some of the vaccinations in the first place. So yeah, that's going to be my biggest kind of sit back and have a look thing, is how the functional medicine people end up reaching out to people like homeopaths, people like naturopaths, people like chiropractors, and seeing how they integrate some of the ideas in the same way that they've integrated acupuncture and the same way that they've integrated osteopathy into some of their practice models. Now, one of the things that I don't want to see happen, I mentioned osteopathy, is exactly what's happened with osteopathy. Osteopaths used to be a separate and distinct profession, and our profession as chiropractors has fought really, really, really hard to maintain that distinct nature ever since the 1919 flu pandemic. Back then, just to give you a little history lesson, in 1918 when the swine flu came out, the AMA asked chiropractors and osteopaths to come into the hospitals and start working with their patients because they were overloaded. They just couldn't see all of them. And both of our professions ended up getting people better without the use of drugs. So at that point in time, the medical profession said, hey, you guys got a good thing going. Why don't we all combine forces? B.J. Palmer, being a very strong personality, said, no, we're going to remain a separate and distinct profession. A.T. Still didn't have a problem with combining in there, and so now you have DOs who prescribe drugs and they do surgery, and they might do gross manipulation to get blood flow into organs. It's just a different way of being. But if you ask your general person on the street, what's an osteopath do? You're going to get kind of a confused look. Now, I went to Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, where the A.T. Still School of Osteopathy is. Used to be Northeast Missouri State University, and then used to be the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine. But there is a statue of A.T. Still in the town square. I mean, you ask anybody in that town what an osteopath is, and you will get the exact definition. I mean, that is the home, right? But I've always asked whenever I give this perspective talk about how osteopaths have kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, and that is not something I want to see happen in chiropractic. You ask people what a chiropractor does, I don't necessarily get the answer that I'm looking for. Most people say, oh, they're good for neck and back pain, instead of, oh, they're good for helping your nerve system function properly. But I think as long as we're separate, I have that opportunity to educate the public about what that is. So functional medicine, yeah, sure. I would love to meet more people who are pursuing that. The big question that I had for myself was, if I were talking to 16-year-old John Edwards today, would he be interested in pursuing functional medicine instead of being a chiropractor? That's a good question. I had a little bit of thinking about this before tonight's talk. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about chiropractic is that I can use these right here. And these have allowed me to travel all over the world and adjust people. One of the things about being a medical doctor that I've always decided would be tough is that unless I was an emergency room physician, but I could be trained as a paramedic and do these kinds of things. That if you have a life-threatening situation, you're out on a boat, you've got something come and hit somebody in the head, what do? You stitch them up. You come across a car accident, someone's not breathing, you do CPR, you do the thing with the MacGyver pen and stick it right in their throat so they can breathe. Outside of all that kind of stuff, if I was going to go into some hut in Fiji and take a look at someone, what is it that I can bring with me where I can help that person's health get to a new level? I'm still going to say in functional medicine that you're going to be able to give the same kinds of diet recommendations or exercise recommendations that I can as a chiropractor. But my ability to adjust someone and remove that nervous system interference, I think, is going to play a very big part in helping that person regain their health. I don't know much about functional medicine, but in the traditional mechanistic model of how the medical field works, I'm still going to presume that the way that they're going to treat the body is by trying to deliver something into the body in order to make it better, instead of trying to remove something in the body to help it function the way it was designed. And unless you've got a little doctor's bag with you, I'm not exactly sure what it is that you're going to be able to do. So I would still maintain that 16-year-old John, if I'm having that conversation with him, I'm going to say to him, what's going to be more useful in your life? If you're going to travel around and you want to go to Europe and you want to go to Australia and you want to go all these places and serve all these people, what's going to serve you the best? Is it a situation of have hands will travel, or do you want the access of being able to go into a hospital in any part of the world? The only limit is that those patients still have to come to you. You still have to bring your bag of tricks with you. Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't mind, like I said, working really, really, really closely with a doctor who is specialized in functional medicine. But as far as if that would be my personal choice for my life and career path, I'm going to say I'm still going to stick with chiropractic.